Hi, I'm James Haskell, and this is Lessons Learned on the Matt Haycox Show.
Okay, James, this is where we play Lessons Learned, where I get to sit down with my guests and ask them what the biggest lessons they've learned from different influences, different moments in their lives are. So tell me, what have you learned from your parents?
I learned my parents about discipline, determination, and hard work. If you want to be successful, you have to put it in. And my dad gave me the best piece of advice ever. You can lie to everyone else, but you can't lie to yourself.
Boarding school.
What the hell did I learn at boarding school? That I didn't particularly like boarding, but I did understand that lots of opportunities are presented at life, and you will only be successful if you try everything and have a go at everything, and that's how you find out what you want and what you're interested in.
Rugby changing rooms.
Rugby changing, I learned don't ever get a haircut or try and do anything out of the norm, because you're going to get absolutely abused for it.
Did you spray each other's bollocks with deep heat?
No, we didn't. We didn't do that. I don't know what we did. What did we do that was mad like that? I mean, there was a lot of pranking going on. I know one of the guys in the French team upset one of the lads. Someone shit in his shoe. Somebody put shit on his boots. Somebody put his foot in it pre-game. He put his foot in the turd, which was, as you can imagine, did not go down particularly well. 5 minutes before kickoff.
What have you learned from heartbreak?
What have I learned from heartbreak? It always hurts. That you always love differently, and that that your mind always plays tricks. That absence makes you believe that things were right. And I think that you'll never control somebody else. You can only ever control yourself. And I think if you worry about yourself and be the best version of yourself, and instead of projecting on others what they did wrong, look at yourself and go, what was I doing? And more often than not, you'll find that you were probably just as much as fault.
What have you learned from your wife?
What have I learned from my wife? That I could always be better, that I'm always doing something wrong. That I've learned compassion from her, seriously, about listening to what other people have got to say, not being so forthright, kind of trying to understand that everyone's on a journey, and that you can deal with things without shouting and anger. You can be compassionate and kind, and she is definitely the most loving, compassionate person I know.
What about Richard Madley?
What have I learned from Richard? That you can be an incredible journalist, for a long period of time. That you can have an unbelievable lid, and that's what else? What else did I learn from Richard? I'm trying to think now. That eating sardine paste all the time is not a good idea.
What have you learned from being a dad yourself?
I've learned from being a dad. I've learned what the real meaning of love is. I think I've had a few partners in my time, and you all love them very differently. But I think the love of a child and a parent to a child is something so primal and so big and so deep that it becomes an emotional roller coaster. And I think everything else builds off the back of that. Learning what the grounding of love for a child means that everything else kind of becomes in much clearer focus.
Social media.
I've learned from social media that it's the worst invention known to man, that everyone's full of shit. The world's full of awful, stupid, backwards, cretinous people who don't deserve to have a smartphone, let alone the internet. And that it's actually not a very nice place. And what it's learned is that it makes me very, very angry. It makes me nothing else. It just makes me angry.
Sporting failure.
Sporting failure, that, you have to risk it all to be successful, that you learn much more about failure than you do from success, but you have to do it in a calm, analytical way, and you have to then take away work on. So you can't be emotional, it has to be practical, and you have to then find the tools to fix those mistakes as well. You can't just go be better, because that doesn't mean anything. It's kind of how do you do it, and also the psychological elements of loss, because that sometimes is the biggest deficit. It's not just about physically what you can do differently, it's the psychological thing, and more often than not, that's the one thing that doesn't get addressed. So that's why mistakes continue to happen.
And sporting success?
I think sporting success, there's nothing better to bond a group of people than success, the fun and the enjoyment, and that they are the days of your lives, those moments of success where you have gone out together through thick and thin and achieved something, and there's no better feeling than that.
From your psychologist?
For my psychologist, that you consistently have to work on yourself, and things like visualization, stopping and changing negative thoughts are all possible. I also think utilization of music to change your mood is probably one of the most powerful tools you can have.
What have you learned from your podcast or doing your podcast?
What have I learned from doing my podcast? That people are interested in what I've got to say, which is shocking, I know. That people want to know about personalities, they want to know about stories, they want to know about life, they want to have a laugh, and they want to see behind the curtain, and that that in itself is good knowledge.
From your most important rugby coach?
My most important rugby coach, what have I learned? I tell you what I've learned is about success. Success is something you have to revisit every day. Success is not something you write at the start of the year on a whiteboard and never revisit. If you want to get better, you have to go after every single day till it becomes a habit. And you have to get bored. You get bored of it, but you have to keep doing it. And that it's not just about talking about it. And that motivation is irrelevant. You want to avoid motivation. What you want to do is keep going back and developing some mental resilience.
What have you learned from DJing?
That I fucking love it. That DJing is the why I was put here to and that is my favorite thing to do. That it's the perfect replacement for playing sport. I'm an individual standing up there, all attention's on me, which is exactly where I want to be. And I just the power of music to make people smile. And if you can make a whole room fall in love with what you're doing, that's the win. What
have you learned from business?
What I've learned for business is always have a plan. It's very easy to come up with an idea and run off with it 100 miles an hour. You got to sit back, get advice from people and work out how you're going to make money from it. Because just because you think an idea is good doesn't mean that there's any way of making money out of it. And until you see a clear path of how you're going to make money and how you're going to do it, and putting a good, concise plan before you take action, that's the most powerful thing. Anyone can start with anything. It's very hard to stop, have a minute, plan things out, and then you've still got to pull the trigger. Because you don't want to be a sniper, but equally you don't want to be a guy with a minigun. You want to be somewhere in between.
What have you learned from the British Lions?
What have I learned from the British Lions was don't never judge your teammates, because you never know what they're like until you actually meet them. That reputations and kind of public image and media image is all bullshit. That good people are good people for whichever country they play for, and that some things, some moments in time are more special and will live with you longer than anything else.
What have you learnt from retiring from rugby?
I've learned from retiring rugby that I was very lucky to get paid to do what I love, and that my life was tricky but pretty simple, to hang around with 30 lads every single day for 19 and a half seasons, paid to be physically in shape, paid to perform, was a dream, and that actually life with being a sportsman was much easier. There was no inclusion, diversity, there was no HR, there was no bullshit. It was all that mattered was, were you good enough, were you put the work in, and were you a good lad? If the answer to any of those questions was no, then you get told to fuck off, and that's how life should be. And you were told you were shit. If you were told you were shit, you were given tools. Now you can't tell anyone anything. Now you got to tell them that, how do you think you could do better, and how do you think you could be, could improve? Instead of go, listen, mate, you're crap. We all know you're crap. You're late. You're disorganised. You're an idiot. You have to talk around the houses, then you can't even fire them. You've got to send them like 3 letters, then they can still get you for constructive dismissal,
What have you learned from being let down by someone?
That, look, some people are always going to let you down, I think, but ultimately, you should never be surprised when someone lets you down, because you need to be aware, life either happens to you or you happen to life. If you look at someone and they were disorganized and they were late and they're late and disorganized for you, what do you think was going to happen? If you see someone is the way they are, why did you expect them to be any different for you? And that's the point. And people are always perpetually shocked by characters, when it's like, take a minute, step back, look at their psychology, look at the way they are, look at their body language, and be much more calculating. As I said, life can either be a constant surprise for you, or you can be calculating and ruthless and look at it in a completely different way. And that's what I do.
Finally, what have you learnt from me, Matt Haycox?
What have I learned from you? I've learned that, today I've learned, that it's good to put yourself into really competitive, successful environments, to keep reminding yourself about the hunger, about where you can go and what you can't do, and where you can go, and that get some money and lend it out to people, because you can have a fucking boat and a penthouse in Dubai.